So it's 1928, and you're driving down Route 66, heading into Albuquerque from the east. As you enter Tijeras Canyon, you realize it's been a long trip, and you start thinking to yourself that you're never going to get there. Until, there it is, on your left, rising up the landmark that lets you know you're finally in the home stretch to get into the city, Elephant Rock. Wait, what? Elephant Rock? I've lived in Albuquerque for years. I've never heard of Elephant Rock. Well, because it's not 1928, but rather the modern world, there's a good chance that even if you were born in Albuquerque and lived here your entire life, that you've never even heard of Elephant Rock. But once upon a time, it was a major landmark. Tourists on Route 66 would stop and have their picture taken next to it. Local merchants would stencil their business's name on the side of it. Everybody knew what it was and where it was. It was kind of a big deal. So, what happened to it? Where is it? How come we haven't heard of it? Why isn't the selfie generation out there Facebooking all of their Instagrams onto the TikTok as we speak? Well, I have a bunch of history books here. Why don't I grab one at random and see what it says? Although the rock was bulldozed off its base in the 1970s to make way for Interstate 40, unfortunately, that is dead wrong, and the author of this book has basically made an unforgivable error and should probably never be allowed to speak on the subject again. Let's take a look and see who that is, by the way. So, as I was saying, the author of this book committed a fairly simple mistake and should probably be allowed to correct the record, perhaps on YouTube. So what did happen to it? Well, let's take a step back in time, say 1.4 billion years ago or so. That is when a heavy layer of granite was laid down by volcanoes in the proto-New Mexico area. Then, about 300 million years ago, all that granite was covered up by the Great Inland Sea, which began to deposit limestone on top of it. About 6 million years ago, the fault that created the present-day Rio Grande Rift Valley began to move. Not to be too technical here, but let's pretend that these two postcard frames are land masses, and the crack between them is the Rio Grande Rift. What happened was part of it started to go up, and meanwhile the other part of it started to go down. The part that went up became Sandia Mountain, and the granite that is on top of it is 10,000 feet above sea level, and it is exactly the same as what is now something like 15,000 feet below my floor. The granite on top of Sandia, which had been under tremendous pressure underneath the ground, once the limestone and such began to erode away, it was now allowed to expand and then crack in its weak points and then erode into rounded boulders. And then those boulders began to tumble down the slopes, including one particular boulder that rolled into Tijeras Canyon and somehow wound up on top of a much larger granite rock. And there it was for about, I don't know, a million years. It was there when human beings first came into Tijeras Canyon. It was there when paths in the canyon became trails, when trails became roads. It was there when European colonizers first came to New Mexico. And apparently people dug it. In addition to all the photographing and advertising, it served as a frequent subject for postcards that wound up sent all over the country. But then, frankly, I blame the highway department. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't have any particular problem with the New Mexico Department of Transportation as it exists today, except, road crews and traffic jams, am I right? But I do have to say that, as far as this story is concerned, the highway department of the 1940s are definitely the bad guys. Because on May 2nd, 1947, a contractor working with the University of New Mexico was hauling a building from the decommissioned Bruns Hospital in Santa Fe to the UNM campus when they came upon Elephant Rock. The contractor was worried that the wide building he was hauling might run into the rock, and so he placed a phone call to the New Mexico Highway Department asking them for permission to knock it off its base so that he could safely pass by. Whoever answered on the other end of the phone gave him that permission. Who that was has never been revealed. In fact, the Highway Department disclaimed any knowledge of this phone call having taken place. At some point between the contractor arriving at Elephant Rock and the actual destruction of the landmark, an Albuquerque woman named Susan Ross Cobb Byer got wind of the planned action and raced to the local telegraph office to send a message to the governor of New Mexico begging him not to allow this landmark to be destroyed. Alas, the telegram arrived too late for the governor to save Elephant Rock, and it was pushed off its perch where it had sat for 1,000,000 years. And let me tell you, people were mad. According to the May 4th, 1947 edition of the Albuquerque Journal, all of Albuquerque was upset Saturday over the destruction of the famous Balancing Rock, one of the state's most famous landmarks. The rock and its destruction are the main topic of conversation in hotel lobbies, cocktail lounges, and even the police station. One woman, a Mrs. Letty Mize, even went so far as to say, "It's a crime. I've lived here for 40 years. The rock was a part of Albuquerque to me." There was even an attempt at 1940s-style crowdfunding to get the rock back up on its pedestal. Albuquerque car dealer Art Seafelt and an artist named Sam Smith attempted to raise a collection in order to do just that. But unfortunately, just a few days after the announcement of their plan, the Highway Department officially stated that it had no interest in putting Elephant Rock back up. And well, that's what happened to Elephant Rock. To add insult to injury, the Bruns Hospital, which was brought to UNM, and the reason that it was knocked off its pedestal in the first place, was only used as a dormitory for 5 years. After that, UNM got rid of it without a second thought. So, the thing that killed Elephant Rock was basically just disposable architecture. To be clear, Elephant Rock does still exist, after a fashion. At least its parts are there. I went out there with City on the Edge co-host Mike Smith and his wife Morrow, and the platform was still available to be climbed upon and frolicked upon, as you can see in this photograph. And here, down in the arroyo behind the pedestal, lies Elephant Rock itself. That's my pal Regis, by the way. Even though I never saw Elephant Rock before it was pushed down into the arroyo, I can't help but feel like Albuquerque lost something really important. Like Letty Mize said almost 75 years ago, it was a part of Albuquerque's identity, and it was lost for no good reason. It actually makes me a little upset. Frankly, I think it's about time that we did something about it. So, I made a shirt. You could buy it. I don't know if that's going to help us get the rock back up on its pedestal or not, but at least it might raise some awareness. That's something people like to do, right? Raise awareness? And while I'm shilling for myself, I should point out that this video was made possible by the generous contributions of patrons who give to the program on patreon.com/City on the Edge podcast. And, the money helps us make shows just like this and feed this little girl right here. Are you hungry?
Yes.
Exactly. My child is hungry.